Bronson, what the hell are you doing?
I'm making turbo noises.
Why are you making turbo noises? You don't even have a turbo.
Oh, really?
Welcome back to House of Hoon. As you may have guessed, we're talking turbos today. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling the factory turbo off my Patrol, which is commonly known as a HT18, and I'm replacing it with this. Now, what is this? Well, let me show you. This right here is a Mamba TD42 16G with a 6cm rear housing. So I just bought this off eBay, like most of the stuff I buy. And the kit comes with everything that you actually need to install it, which is fantastic. So it comes with this bag of goodies here. It's obviously got all of your water lines. It's got all of your oil feed lines, your turbo drain hose. It's got some extra, I'll pull all this stuff out so you can see it. So we've got all of your fittings, so your banjo fittings. You've got brand new studs and nuts, which is good because mine are rooted. Got some spare springs for different spring pressures within the wastegate. A couple more fittings. So as you can see, it's got absolutely everything that you could need to do the install. And it also comes with the structure manual, or rough specs I guess you call it. Comes with a nice little gasket, which is good for the install. Comes with a little balancing report, which, considering it's not, top quality, I don't know how accurate that is, but it's good to have anyway. And it also comes with V-band, because as you may have noticed, this has a V-band on the rear rather than a typical 2 or 3 bolt flange. So for those of you that don't know much about V-bands, let me just pull this out of the packet. So obviously you've got your little V-band or your clamp. That goes on like that, obviously once you pull that off. And then you can connect your 3-inch dump pipe to it, run it down, and happy days. Now, why did I go with this turbo? 1, because it was cheap. 2, because of the size. So most people go a fairly large turbo. This is kind of almost one step up from the factory turbo. So it's not going to push massive power, but I have heard of guys running 200 plus horsepower through these turbos. So I do have a lot of headroom for the setup I'm going to be running. And also because it's a nice small turbo, it'll spool up real early, which is what you want for four-wheel driving, especially on a old tractor engine like what I'm running. And getting back to number 1, which was the cost. So this was about 1,200 bucks. And the whole idea behind what I'm doing with the turbo, the intercooler, the intake, everything like that, is to be able to do all of that work for, including the tune, the professional tune, which I'll be getting soon, to do all of that work for the same price as what I'd buy a name brand turbo such as a UFI turbo. So by doing all of this kind of on the cheap, we'll achieve that. How good it's going to be, I don't know. I'm not saying it's going to be fantastic, but we shall see. Everything on this car is an experiment, so come along with me for the ride. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is spray WD-40 on all of the turbos, nuts, bolts, and studs. So the reason I'm going to be doing that is because with all the heat cycles that the turbo goes through, they can often be hard to undo. So I'm just going to do that now, but I've also been spraying all of these nuts, bolts, and studs for about the last week, just once a day, and that way you just give them a bit of time to soak in, and hopefully when I go to undo them now, they'll actually come undone without breaking. first dilemma has arose. There are 4 nuts that hold the turbo onto the exhaust manifold, and one of them has come off easy as pie, very happy. The other 3 will not budge, so it's time to get serious and get the oxy out. Alright, good news, bad news time. Good news. I was able to heat all of the nuts up and get them all to be loosened off. Now for the bad news. I can't actually get the spanner onto the rear nut to keep on loosening it off to get it off. So I'm going to have to resort to grinding my high quality Aldi tools so that I can try and get it in there enough to keep on loosening it. I don't like doing that, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Alright, I've got the turbo out now. I ended up having to pull the battery out and a couple of other things out of the engine bay to get it out. Now, as for the oxy heating up the nuts, that worked really well. The problem was you heat the nut up and you get about half a turn in before it starts binding back up again. So ended up just using the oxy like 50 times by the time I got one nut off, but it ended up working pretty good. One of the nuts basically wouldn't end up coming off, so I ended up bending one of the studs and cutting that. So I'm going to now need to replace all the studs regardless. Luckily the kit comes with new studs. So I'll get on to replacing those studs first, and then I can continue to keep on pulling more stuff off the engine. I decided to not utilise the water coolant lines that came with the turbo and instead just use some Mitsubishi Magna sump plugs to neatly cover the holes. Alrighty, so I've now got the turbo on. I've done all the plumbing. So the oil feed line is on, the oil drain hose is also on. Now off camera, I ended up making up a steel bracket which bolts to the block, and that basically is just to keep the braided oil feed line away from the block itself, and also to keep it away from the turbo housing just so it doesn't rub through or anything. I've also got the intake pipe all done, so the only thing that's left now to do is the dump pipe. Now the dump pipe requires some lobster back work, so if you don't know what lobster back work is, hold on, I'm about to do another video just on doing the lobster back dump pipe. If you've got any questions about the turbo install or the turbo itself, feel free to drop a comment below, and if you found this video useful or somewhat entertaining, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you on the next one.